plants like this size, it got a little cold morning, and just the tips kind of burnt, but it wouldn't kill the whole plant. And then too, this spring in particular, it's been very windy, right? Anyone who was out last Wednesday, crazy. And so these small plants, like, have been in the real world and outside some, but whipping around with those strong winds can be tough. And if we snap this main stem, that can really hinder the growth and things too. So I don't think we're going to have like we did last Wednesday again. Gosh, yeah, that was crazy. And you can see
when Melissa grows these at home, or Lorna, they probably at some point take their hand and go over them, pretending like there's a wind. And what it does, it
strengthens
stimulates
them,
the stem to be strong, to grow the cells so that it can handle it.
And then that also triggers to the plant, like, oh, I don't want to be flopping around, so I'll grow stronger roots to hold myself up. So when we start these inside, my son likes to pet them, but we have a fan that runs on them. Yeah, exactly. And then these have been outside, getting real world sunshine, wind. I didn't have them out that Wednesday.
Unwise.
Yes, just because I was a little worried because that was so windy. But they're what's called hardened off. And so sometimes you can get something from a nursery and it's never actually seen direct sunlight on it, and then you can get some like burning on the tips from the sun. It's always had filtered light through greenhouse setting. And so we want to make sure plants are hardened off, meaning they're hardened, ready for the real world too. And so that's often some new gardeners, that's a mistake, because you get it from the nursery and plant it, right? And then it gets the real sun. It's and gets sunburned and things too. So all these here today have been hardened off too. And then it's also hardened off to the cold nights too. So if it's in a nice cozy greenhouse its whole life, it might not know how to. And some varieties are just more vulnerable than others to different conditions too. And so I've had that too, especially when we're at agave, some right next to each other, totally fine, and then the one next to it like killed off by a late frost. So another thing about tomatoes, or we'll talk about how to plant this things too, and we can pass these around and see, especially the indeterminate varieties will produce lots of what are called suckers. So you can see like coming out between the main stem and the leaves is a little baby tomato plant. You can pass it around and kind of see those.
There's one right there too.
And so those, if they are allowed to get a little bigger, you could actually cut that and make a new plant. You could put it in water to get some roots. And so like not only gives you tomatoes, it gives you all kinds of plants too. And so typically, there's a bunch coming out each section. And so when we go to plant these though, what I will do is pinch those off and just discard, because the best way to plant a tomato is to plant the tomato deeply. And so actually on this one, I won't even take this one off. Ruthless, yeah. Because for the first few weeks, what you want to grow is not tomatoes. What you'll grow is the roots of the plant, and get it really well established. And so we're going to bury this, make a hole this deep, and bury the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
And so where the roots are now, which I was trying to pull this out, but I didn't want to fling dirt everywhere.
I wonder if you don't pinch them off.
You don't have to. It'll get much bushier and bigger, and so I kind of like an in-between stage. But in the beginning to plant, so you can see all those nice roots. And so when we bury this, and that's what you want. When you find a plant at the nursery, you want to be able to pull it out and kind of hold together, and you see lots of roots. Not only roots. Like sometimes the nursery plants, it's all roots and there's no soil. Like they give those a lot of fertilizer to really like bulk up the roots and are root bound. It's too much, and so then they don't know how to spread beyond that things. And so what the nursery, then they start to circle in the pot, and you can kind of see that circling. These are sort of straight up and down. So we'd want to bury this, and so tomatoes have this wonderful ability to grow roots all along the stem. And so once this is buried, this will fill in with more roots.
Wow.
And so that's what I mean. At first, what you want to be is a root farmer and really get lots of roots. And so what do you think lots of roots does ultimately for the top of the plant? Stronger, too. Yeah, more roots is more veins it has to pull up water, to pull up nutrients, and ultimately grow bigger, better, and faster. So that's why we try to bury the stem. And so over, a few weeks it'll take to kind of fill in, and this will also become roots. Also, by burying it deeply like that, where it dries out the fastest, way down under in your soil or up at the top. So if we put our roots deep, that's where the water, you can always find if you come to your garden, it's, oh, it looks so dry. But then you move away the first few inches, it should be wet underneath.
Yeah.
And so it'll be able to get a good base and use that deep moisture. That's why when you water, especially when you hand water, you want to water deeply. It's more important to get that water down into your soil than necessarily come every single day and water the top.
Did everybody hear that?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you want to be able, when you dig your hole for this, if you're finding this big hole is dry, you're not watering enough. So what I would do is I pinch off all those to get roots along the stem. Dig a hole twice as big as kind of this area to loosen the soil. Here's what I would do. Again, it's all like how much resources, what do you have available? I don't know if you have, for those gardeners here, nice fertilizer. Then in that hole, I'll throw 1 to 2 cups of worm castings in the bottom of that hole.
Write this down.
My next trick, and some of these that I brought today have been potted up with this in it, is to use alfalfa meal or little alfalfa pellets. What you'd feed a horse, what you'd feed a rabbit, are very high nitrogen. And so as those get hydrated and decompose, it can feed your plant.
How much?
Like a handful, like half cup maybe.
There's still
in
some,
the big hole.
There's some in that storage unit. I'll get them out.
Okay, yeah. So I just throw those in. And then I use a product that has mycorrhiza. Mycorrhiza are little microscopic organisms that live in the soil. And again, remember, you're a root farmer and a soil farmer first, then you're a tomato farmer.
How do you spell that word?
Mycorrhiza. So M-Y-R-O. See,
Micro.
We found Melissa's only.
My spelling is not my. Okay.
There's an H in there.
M-Y-C-H-R-O. Someone else.
It's
M-I-C-R-O-R-I-S-A.
It's
No.
R-H.
Yeah, there's
Yes,
an H in
R-H-I-Z-A.
Yeah.
Mycorrhiza.
A-E. Yeah.
A-E?
A-E?
I think there's an E at the end.
Somebody Google that.
That's like the hardest word you could ask us to say.
So the brand I like to use is Mykos. M-Y-K-O-S. Mykos mycorrhiza, which you can't find it, like the Ace Hardware probably doesn't have it, or Home Depot doesn't have it, but Whitfield's would have it. Some of the more nurseries would have it. But when you buy soil, when you look at other products, you can see other fertilizers, one of the ingredients will be mycorrhiza. And so you can look for it in other products too, will have some as well. So there's some fancy, more expensive potting soils or raised bed mixes. You can see it listed. Usually those are a little pricier. So do you have to do that? No, but I like doing it. And so what it does is it really bulks up the roots. And again, more roots is more nutrient uptake and ultimately like a bigger plant. And so those mycorrhiza actually what takes your compost and all your stuff in the soil and it decomposes it to make it actually a soluble form in water that the plant can actually suck up. Because right now, like your compost and things you add is in a solid form. Plants can't take up solids. They have to take up things that are dissolved in water. And so the more mycorrhiza you have, the faster it'll kind of decompose all of your compost and good stuff. Yeah, that you add. And so it exists, they exist in there, but we're just wanting to add more so that process is faster and more immediate.
What about manure?
Yeah, so I don't do that necessarily in the hole, too. So let me finish the hole, and then I can talk about, maybe I should have done what the bed should look like more. And the mycorrhiza live on the roots, so you apply it right to the roots, or right before you plop the root down. Then you can also do a handful of some kind of all-purpose fertilizer, whatever you have, whatever you use, usually a granular fertilizer. I've been using Tony's Magic Mix. Tony's out of Tucson and developed his magic mix of stuff, which includes mycorrhiza and other bat guano, I think some chicken manure things. It's sort of a lot of good stuff.
That's what we have.
Yeah. Yeah, so that would be good. Decomposed, like not fresh chicken manure. And then just taking other soil and backfilling into the hole. And then the next step, if you don't do it right away, do it soon, is to figure out how you're going to support the tomato. Putting the tomato cage, or if you want to put like a longer panel type thing, or do what Lillian has out here is more of a weave trellis, something that's going to support this as it grows. Nothing's harder than getting one of these cages on a big tomato plant and break all the branches and things. So think about that support before it gets too big.
And we have lots of them.
Yes, that's right.
Not buy one.
Yeah. Don't buy more tomato cages.
Many of them back there.
And I would do 1 cage per tomato plant. And you could do more in one tomato plant. But generally they need at least 18 inches, if not 3 feet apart. You know, you can really try to squeeze things in these narrow beds, like you could do 2 on one end. But it's hard when you have a little plant and you're like, but you got to think ultimately like how big you want it to grow. I didn't talk about the soil prep like in general. Every season, anytime you plant new, you got to add soil. You're probably noticing if you have raised beds, even in the ground, you notice the soil level always drops. Well, all that stuff you harvested has to be built from something. And so it's built from the soil. And so the soil level does drop over time. So we got to top it off with new mix in. Compost, worm castings, steer manure is one of the most economical things too, because you can get a bag. Is it $1.50 now or $2 for a big bag of steer manure? That's been aged and it's decomposed. That's really high nitrogen, which helps with green growth. Compost or other raised bed mixes, you can buy bags of. Some of those have added materials to help with aeration too, so you don't get really like dense, compact soil.
So
To replenish the nutrients and replenish the volume.
Before you go
Yeah.
these beds out here are in great shape. They're 5 years.
Oh yeah.
Soil's been developed. Then these came on, and they're getting there. They're pretty close to being just about perfect. These, however, are the brand new. And last year you might have seen they didn't grow as well. You need to add these things to it. I think this year they'll be the best year.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Soil gets better over time as it's getting more decomposed, as those mycorrhiza and microorganisms in the soil populations build up. It just gets better with time. And that's why it's important to make sure that there's moisture in the soil.
All the time.
Yeah, because if those beds dry out and that soil dries out, all those microorganisms can die. If you have any worms in them, they'll dry up and die or find somewhere else to go. And so soil is alive. And so we want to make sure that if you do take that vacation or break, that there's some way to keep it moist or keep it covered, things so that it can retain the moisture too. And then I saw someone had mulch too. And so to keep that moisture in and keep things alive.